When you start learning to draw animals, two of the most essential concepts you will need to master are proportions and perspective. These two principles are the foundation for creating lifelike and realistic animal drawings. Whether you're drawing a lion, a dog, or a bird, understand how the parts of the animal relate to each other in size and how they appear in space will make all the difference in how natural and accurate your drawings look. If your animal drawings ever feel off or unrealistic, chances are it's because you haven't fully grasped how these concepts work together. But don't worry, once you understand proportions and perspective, you'll see a huge improvement in your art. So proportions are all about the size relationships between the parts of the animal's body. Getting these proportions right is critical because if one part of the animal's body is out of proportion with the rest, the whole drawing will look unnatural. For example, when you're drawing a dog, its head should be proportionally larger than its legs, but the size of the legs and body should be balanced. If you make the legs too short or the head too tiny, it will throw off the entire drawing. When I first started drawing animals, I struggled with proportions. I remember trying to draw a horse, but I made the legs far too short compared to its massive body. The horse didn't look like it could stand, let alone run. I quickly realized that starting with basic shapes like circles and ovals for the head, torso, and joints could help me establish the proportions before diving into the details. This helped me get the proportions right without feeling overwhelmed by the smaller features. As you continue practicing, you will begin to notice the natural proportion differences that exist between different species. For example, the body of a giraffe has long, thin legs with a small head compared to its large body. Once you understand proportions, perspective is what makes your animal drawings look three-dimensional and realistic. Without perspective, your animals might look flat and as though they're floating on the page rather than occupying real space. Perspective helps to show the depth of the scene, making the animal appear as though it's really there. When you draw animals, it helps you show how the animal changes in size and shape depending on the angle from which you view it. So when you draw something like a lion from the side, it will look relatively flat, but when you draw it from below, the head may appear larger. The body might actually taper down toward the back. This is because parts of the animal that are closer to you will look bigger, while parts farther away will seem smaller. This is the essence of perspective. I remember my first attempt of drawing a bird in flight. It was actually a challenge because I didn't understand how perspective worked for objects in motion nearly as well because it was my first time. So the wings kind of looked a little bit oddly shaped and making the bird look a little bit stiff and flat because I just wasn't getting the wings quite right. It wasn't until I learned about foreshortening, where parts of the bird closer to you appear larger and parts further away shrink, that I was able to make the bird look like it was actually flying. This technique helped give the bird depth and a sense of motion. Another important element of perspective is foreshortening, where parts of the animal appear compressed or distorted when viewed from a certain angle. If you're drawing a bird in flight, its wings may look much larger near the viewer and smaller as they move away. Foreshortening gives the impression that the animal is truly in motion It gives the impression that the animal is truly in motion and that its body is existing in three-dimensional space. To practice perspective with animals, try drawing them from different angles or positions. For example, draw a dog from above, below, and from the side to see how its proportions change depending on the viewpoint. The more you practice, the better you'll get at capturing the depth and dimension of animals, giving your drawing a more realistic and dynamic feel. When you combine proportions with perspective, you can create incredibly lifelike animal drawings. When drawing something like a lion crouching low to the ground, you will first establish the correct proportions, making sure the head is slightly larger in relation to the body and that the legs are positioned correctly. Then you can apply perspective to make the lion look like it's actually crouching in space. The parts of the body closer to you will look larger, while the hind legs might seem smaller. This use of both proportions and perspective will make the lion look as if it's truly in motion and has volume and depth. You can be drawing a bird as a different perspective, perched on a branch. If you're drawing the bird from below, you'll need to consider the perspective, making the body appear smaller and the head appear larger. Meanwhile, the branch may appear to curve as it extends away from you. By using both proportions and perspective, you'll create a more dynamic and realistic image of the bird. Mastering these two is essential for any artist who wants to draw animals realistically. Understanding how the parts of an animal relate to each other in size and how they shift depending on the angle will allow you to capture the true essence of the animal. At first, it might feel a little overwhelming to keep track of both proportions and perspective, but with practice, you'll begin to see your animal drawings come to life. So take your time, observe your subject carefully, and don't be afraid to make those mistakes. I really hope that this video was helpful. If you want to see more content like this, please don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.